There were some established eucalypts on the site, and among them was this I just need some water, particularly fine specimen of Eucalyptus dolichoryncha, which we think is about 40 years old. In many ways, this tree was a source of inspiration for us. If this Western Australian tree could do so well here, it not only meant that the climate was right, but also that the soil was suitable. Melton's long-term annual rainfall average is under 500 millimetres. So you've heard that Melbourne is trending between 500 and 600. So it's considerably drier than Melbourne. So it seemed obvious to try to find eucalypts which would tolerate these dry conditions. We chose 450 millimetres or below annual rainfall as our criteria for selection of eucalypts. This means that nearly all of our trees come from areas which are drier and warmer than Melton. My husband David and I already had considerable experience in growing eucalypts from seed, and we were confident of producing plants quite quickly. It was then a matter of finding seed of suitable species. At this time, we had $100 in the bank, donated to us and earmarked for purchase of seed. Can I have another slide, please? We had a copy of Euclid, an excellent resource which describes almost all of the suitable eucalypts in Australia, including their distribution. It's now available free online. So I went through looking for species which had particularly attractive features, such as flowers, bark, foliage, form or rarity, and which came from low rainfall areas. It was also important to us to choose small growing species which would be suitable for home gardens. Nindethana Seed Company in Western Australia was a great resource for seed. We also have a lot of contacts through our long association with the Australian Plant Society and received a few donations of seed from them. Many things fell in our favour at the beginning of the project. The Friends were successful in gaining a state government grant, and we received a grant from the Dahl Trust, which gave us enough money to lay out the beds, form paths and undertake weed control. I'll just need a succession of slides here. Here are a few pictures of the processes we used to grow our seedlings. Okay, so these were grown at our own property. We had a little hothousey thing. So the beginning of October, we sowed the seed. End of October, they were doing pretty well. And by December, we were potting them up. So there they are in their little polystyrene boxes, tiny little fellas. And there they are 3 months later. Thank you. So in the meantime, we were busy siting paths. We might just have a slide of this and you can see how low tech we were. We had a stick. No, we had 2 sticks. And we had some cans of paint and we marked out the paths. The weather in the summer after our initial plantings was kind, not too hot or dry, and the trees which were planted out from the forestry tubes in June 2011 established really well with over 90% success rate. The trees from this first planting were watered either with a hose or a bucket for the first summer and have not been watered since. We've added some extra species over the succeeding years and we now have about 100 species in the Arboretum, most of which have flowered. They're planted mostly in groups of 3 to 5 plants per species. We have had some losses, mainly due to wind damage. After the initial planting, work began on establishing an understory of low-growing dry-tolerant species, especially Eremophilus and Myoporums. 3 years later, it looked like this. Oh no, that's the initial planting. Sorry, I missed that slide. And 3 years later, it looked like this. In 2015, we produced a booklet describing all the species in the Arboretum, including photos of many of the species in flower. This has just been expanded to include recorded flowering times in the garden and several other species which have been planted in other parts of the garden. The collection was registered with Plant Trust as a collection of dryland eucalypts in 2017. And I've got a few slides now of some of the rarer species we've got in the garden. The first one is Eucalyptus cynandra. This is declared threatened rare flora from a restricted area in the wheat belt north of Perth. It's a delightful and delicate small tree, and we've got two colour forms. The other one is white, and it was one of our first to flower only 2 years after planting. The next one is Eucalyptus dolichorhyncha. Now this is dolichorhyncha, yep. So this is the flowers of our inspiration tree that I mentioned before, the one that told us that we should be able to grow the things we're growing. One more now. Eucalyptus wyolensis. Now this is quite a little rare species from South Australia. It only grows a couple of metres high and a bit wider, and it keeps that juvenile foliage. Next one. Eucalyptus cassia, subspecies cassia. It's not as commonly grown as the subspecies magna, the silver princess, but it is classed as priority 4 rare in Western Australia. The next one is Eucalyptus formanii, which is also classed as rare, and it looks nothing like a typical eucalypt until it flowers, and you've got one of the flowers here. Again, it's a priority 4 Western Australian rare species. The next one is Eucalyptus cruziana, also priority 4 rare, a low-growing species, lovely yellow flowers, and keeps its juvenile foliage. A lot of these are great for floristry as well as just general interest in the garden. Eucalyptus pimpiniana. This is one of the smallest growing of the eucalypts. This one in our garden is only about 1 metre high. It's been in one of our first plantings, so it's now 9 years old. And there's just a close-up of the flower, I think. Yeah, very, very floriferous. At the moment, it's just covered in buds. And the last one I've got is Eucalyptus rhodantha, which is a bit of our star plant in the garden. It is a threatened rare flora from Western Australia. It retains its juvenile foliage, and it keeps those pink flowers much longer. Some of you might know Eucalyptus macrocarpa better than rhodantha. Macrocarpa for us flowers very briefly, only about 3 weeks. This one flowers for about 3 months. So it's been really, really good. So lastly, I'd like to make a few observations. I think that sometimes it's easier to plan if you have limited resources. By that I mean, in our instance, we didn't have much money, so we had to go back to basics and grow things from seed. We didn't have a permanent watering system, so we had to grow things that didn't need much water. We kept our landscaping to a minimum because we had no money to do anything else. Could we have done anything better? In retrospect, we could have done more with grouping our trees in geographic locations. Although many of the species come from Western Australia, we also have species from Victoria and South Australia, which are scattered throughout the Arboretum. Our challenge for the future is to maintain the collection by careful pruning of the trees. Many of the mallees will need to be cut to ground level to keep them healthy, and some of the shorter-lived species will need replacing. While nearly all the species are well labelled with botanic labels, we now would like to do more work on explanatory signage. And there's one final slide showing our botanic label, just to show off. Overall, I think our project's been very successful so far and has drawn attention from many eucalypt enthusiasts as well as the general public. Thank you.